The FIFA World Cup fever is in town, and so we decided to do a series of interesting historical facts and events associated with football, or soccer for the Americans watching this video. Now listen to this. What if I told you that England, the country that gave us modern football, didn't actually invent it? What if the real story is a little more complicated? The most common theory of football's creation hides a much older story, one that truly highlights the global nature of the game. Contrary to popular belief, the story doesn't start with 19th century English school kids kicking a ball on muddy fields, but instead, it's in ancient China. So let's explore how the Chinese were the proponents of the earliest known version of football, and how England's role wasn't actually to invent the game, but rather to organize it. You see, the tale that we are often told goes something like this. Back in 1863, a group of distinguished gentlemen met in a London tavern, scribbled down some rules, and created the sport we know and love today. It's a simple story, and it is why we celebrate England as the home of football, the place where the laws of the game were first set in stone. The Football Association, or FA, was the first of its kind, and its rulebook became the blueprint for the entire world. Listen, we got to give it to them. It is indeed a very neat and clean origin story. But to find the real soul of the game, we need to go much further back in time, and much, much further east. Back in ancient China, they played a game called Cuju, which literally translates to kickball. And this wasn't just some primitive free-for-all. The earliest written references to Cuju appeared during the Warring States period, dating back over 2,200 years. Military manuals from that time describe it as a form of training designed to keep soldiers fit. But Cuju quickly grew beyond the barracks. It became a beloved pastime for everyone from emperors to commoners. The rules were surprisingly advanced. Players had to kick a leather ball, originally stuffed with feathers and later air-filled, into a goal. And here's the crucial part that makes Cuju feel so familiar: a general prohibition on using your hands. While the rules varied over centuries, the focus was overwhelmingly on skill with your feet. Think about that. Over 2,000 years ago, a game existed with the core principle of association football already in place. They had playing areas, goals, and rules against handling the ball. By the Tang and Song dynasties, Cuju was in its golden age. The solid ball was replaced by an air-filled one, making it bouncier and more dynamic. There were professional players, organized troops, and the sport's popularity even extended to women, who formed their own groups to play. This wasn't chaos, it was a sport with skill, artistry, and regulations. There were even manuals describing different types of kicks for players to master. And this isn't some fringe theory. In 2004, FIFA officially recognized Cuju as the earliest form of football for which there is scientific evidence. The world's governing body of football acknowledges that the ancient roots of a kicking game are not in England, but in China. By the way, while Cuju was the earliest known version of a game that is very close to modern football, there were many other games in the ancient world that were somewhat similar. I mean, think about it. The instinct to kick a ball is actually pretty universal. The ancient Greeks had episkiros, which involved both kicking and throwing. The Romans adapted it into harpastum, a brutal game that was closer to modern rugby. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztecs played intense ritual ball games, using their hips and thighs to drive a solid rubber ball through a stone hoop. The key thing to remember is that the idea of a ball game wasn't invented in just one place. But among these ancient games, Cuju stands out. It was unique in its specific focus on kicking and its use of a net as a target. So, how did football come about in England then? While China had organized competitions and technical manuals for Cuju, Europe had mob football. And I mean literally. From the Middle Ages on, entire villages in England would play against each other in massive, unruly matches. There was no limit on players. Whole towns could join in. There was no defined pitch. The field could stretch for miles, with goals being landmarks like a church door or a stream. I guess that might explain why some of the rivalries in football go back ages. The ball was often an inflated pig's bladder, and the rules, well, there really weren't any. Players could kick, punch, carry, and drag the ball, and each other, by any means necessary. The game was more like a mass brawl, frequently leading to broken bones and property damage. It was so disruptive that English kings repeatedly tried to ban it. Between 1314 and 1667, football was outlawed dozens of times. In fact, King Edward III banned it because he was worried his subjects were playing football instead of practicing archery, a skill he needed for his army. For centuries, this was the state of football in England, a violent, formless folk ritual. So how did England go from this chaotic mess to being credited as the inventor of the modern game? The answer isn't invention, but organization. The big change happened in the 19th century. As England's elite public schools like Eton and Rugby started playing each other, they hit a snag. You see, each school had its own version of football. Some allowed carrying the ball while others were strictly feet only. It was impossible to have a fair match. An early attempt to fix this was the Cambridge Rules of 1848, which heavily favoured a kicking game. But the defining moment came on October 26, 1863. Representatives from 12 clubs and schools gathered at the Freemasons' Tavern in London, prompted by a solicitor named Ebenezer Cobb Morley. His goal was to create one single unified set of rules. The main point of contention was clear: could players carry the ball and hack their opponents in the shins? The traditionalists, led by the man from Blackheath, fought to keep these rules. But Morley and the kicking game advocates won. They voted to ban hacking and running with the ball. I guess you can see where we are getting here. This is the big split between modern football and rugby, and I suppose every other game inspired from it. Blackheath walked out. The clubs that left would later form the Rugby Football Union. The ones who stayed finalised the first 13 laws of the game for association football. They took the messy, chaotic traditions of English folk football, picked the parts they liked and wrote them down. They almost certainly had never heard of Cuju. So, did China invent football? If we're talking about the earliest known organised sport centred on kicking a ball into a net without using your hands, then the evidence points to Cuju. It had rules, skilled players, and a cultural legacy that lasted for centuries, long before anyone in England wrote down a unified rulebook. And did England steal it? Not literally, of course, but by framing codification as invention, the narrative effectively erased a much deeper and more global history. England's huge contribution was standardization. The story of football is actually one of a universal human passion that appeared across the globe, was refined into a sophisticated sport in ancient China, survived centuries of chaos in medieval Europe, and was finally standardized in 19th century London. What's your take? Is it fair to say England stole football's legacy, or were they just the ones who finally wrote down the rules for the modern age? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this hidden history, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into the stories you thought you knew.